Welcome back to my Dark Souls 3 to Fire Fate Edition pre-recorded run. This is the third installment, as in the fourth video in this series. We are going to be going through the Undead settlement, and there was a lot of ground to cover, as you can see by the video length, so grab your Estus, we're going to be here a while. So first of all, you want to make sure you get these sons of bitches. They can be rather annoying, especially in the cathedral later on. There is an NPC we'll be talking to, a very important one, but salty gestures. This isn't the PS4 after all. This is one of the Launder boys, and you'll actually want to talk to him. Now, the thing I don't understand with this character is that you do need to increase your level if you want to get any of the good stuff, which does make the soul level 1 probability a lot less likely, especially if you want to get the best low soul level weapon, the Dark Hand, which is actually a lot more useful in this game compared to Dark Souls 1. The only problem is you can only get one per new game cycle, which is kind of annoying since it has the same blocking properties that it had in the first game. And it strangely wasn't in Dark Souls 2. Oh well. Anyway, I definitely have to admit that the Undead settlement is probably one of the better opening areas, as with Bloodborne's first area of the game. And despite this game's linear structure as a whole, it's actually fairly open with a number of shortcuts you can take in various twists and turns, with its only real problem is that it's not exactly like Dark Souls 1, where you have interconnected areas. But speaking of connected areas, you're going to have to collect Loretta's Bone. This is very important if you want to access the rest of Grey Rat's quest lines. You can drop this item for some particular item for the crows, I believe they're called, the birds, whatever. Don't do this, it's not worth it, but do grab the Estus shard. You definitely want to try to get as many of those as you can. I don't know why they let you have the option to essentially soft lock your quest line with a character who essentially will give you a lot more compared to just giving the item to the tiring meta of references the game. Not going to really get into that debacle yet, but speaking of references to video game, we're going to be accessing the Sunlight Covenant badge in a second. And I say Covenant badge because, just like in Dark Souls 2, switching Covenants has absolutely no penalty, which is somehow a bad thing, except these same people probably never played Salt and Sanctuary, where there is actual harsh punishments for so much as switching Covenants. And considering how Salt and Sanctuary plays, you're basically forced to do exactly that. I'm sorry, but I don't think that losing half your offerings is as bad as people make it out to be. It only really becomes an issue if you actually break the Covenant. I think some people really, they really kind of push the whole thing as being this cool thing when it doesn't really do anything. There's no real punishment for switching Covenants in Dark Souls 1 unless you forget how many offerings you got. But that's about it. But thankfully, unlike in Dark Souls 2, you don't have to go back to various places. It's just now it's as easy as switching rings, but I guess people have an issue with that because what is accessibility, Alex? Speaking of Alex, we're going to have to take out Holy Knight Hodrick, but for some reason you actually can rest at the bonfire and quit out the game, since this particular summon is not like others. It's actually kind of like that one summon in the DLC of Dark Souls 1 with the V for Vendetta guy, which is kind of weird, but whatever. If you're not very good at the game like I am, you'll want to utilize the shield as with the swordsman from a while ago, as I swing the axe to break over the barriers, I guess. Not like weapon durability is really a problem in this game, but you'll want to make sure you get near the bridge so you can prep the inevitable downfall of this man. Now, this dude hurts like a truck. He can heal and look at your direction at the same time, so the game literally cheats by making so you cannot get a backstab whatsoever. And he has a one-handed shield which has the ability to parry, so you can't even swing your sword aimlessly, which is, unironically, the best meta of this game. Just look at all the various Soul Level 1 runs and see how many don't use the fucking broadsword. As I ridiculously fuck up on the push block, whatever the hell it's called. This isn't a fighting game after all, but it could be, I guess, if all the unofficial rules that people follow during PvP. But speaking of rule breaking, I guess sometimes the AI could kind of roll off the cliff, but if you don't get as lucky with that, you can just do this maneuver and you'll easily take care of him. There is actually this other channel called Garu Shadowscale who actually did somehow parry this motherfucker, which I'll give credit for because I cannot parry for shit in this game. Dark Souls 1, I can get down to parrying because it runs at 30 frames a second. But if Dark Souls 2, the only way I can even parry it all is if you use the target shield or that other really small shield. And Dark Souls 3, you get, I guess, so many partial parries, it's not even funny. So in this instance, you just push him off the cliff, get your souls, and he does drop the Vertebra Shackle, which is the item you need in order to farm the Covenant stuff to get the spell that he uses, which I don't think he actually used, which is the spell from Dark Souls 2, Warmth, and of course, the Chaos Blade, I believe it's called, the one that makes it so that you can stab yourself in the chest and get some buff or some shit, which is unironically one of the better boss weapons in Dark Souls 2, but it's not the same weapon, it's just a weapon with the same ability. Makes sense of that. Yoshimitsu had that move in Tekken, if you didn't know. I forget which one specifically. But speaking of nonsensical ramblings, ignore that loot and grab this instead. The yellow loot is one of the starter class sets, which you don't really need. Now, I mentioned that if you pick the white branch, you actually don't have to worry about the giant dude shooting arrows at you, because if you don't have that, he will rain arrows down on your ass, and the hitboxes are tremendously annoying. So make sure you grab everything. Only pick up the young white branch once you're done, because he'll stop shooting at that area, I guess. But you also need to collect him anyway if you want to get the Hawk Ring without killing him. And killing him even early on would be kind of detrimental. And we will be using his services in 2 other areas. So since we're not going to be really around this area, I'm going to pick him up anyway. But if you somehow miss something, don't forget to pick up those branches for later on. Now, we're not going to be fighting the Curse Rotted Greatwood in this video yet, because we still have a lot of exploration to do, and it's not even past the 10-minute mark, believe it or not. Now, one thing I don't really like about this game, and oh my god, here goes Playa criticizing the perfect game that is Dark Souls 3, there's not really that many optional bosses per se. And while you can argue that the Curse Rotted Greatwood is technically optional, he really isn't, because you need to kill him to get the item that you need to create boss weapons. And funny story about that, the very first time I played this game, I didn't even give the dude who is the name of the dude whose name I forget. If you don't give him the key item you need to give him to make boss weapons, you can't make boss weapons for that playthrough, which is really stupid. You can legitimately miss out on boss weapons if you don't even give them the key item before the very late of the part of the game, which is really nonsense in my opinion. And what's also nonsense is those giant red dudes with the pots and shit. Not only can you not get those as weapons, but they actually drop rubbish, which I want to ask any blatant fanboy or even Hidetaka Miyazaki if I can ever write Japanese. What the fuck is the point of making an item that has absolutely no purpose part of a already annoying loot drop? Like, legit. And also, why the hell can't you open that fucking door from the other side? It also makes no fucking sense, but whatever. People defend that shit because the game is perfect. Gonna pull that DSP-tism of when he was fighting Ludwig in Bloodborne New Game Plus, and even that one bit in his original run of San Andreas. Except, he complains about everything. I complain about certain things that people will take any form of complaining, whether it be big or small, and make it into a nothing burger, I guess. But, speaking of unexplainable tangents, there's an NPC going to be coming to in just a second, and he'll actually give you the ability to create pyromancies, I guess, or make you learn them. Why the fuck is this dude able to just escape out of there? Like, this is the thing I don't understand with this game as well, speaking of tangents. The dude is literally in a cage, and you have to use Homeward Bones to escape, but yet you don't have to give him Homeward Bones. So you can just talk to him, and he just disappears like Thanos, I guess, with the Black Separation Crystal, and yet he just disappears, and you don't even open the door to unlock him or anything. It just makes no fucking sense. If you were to give him a key, it would maybe make sense. And before someone tries to argue that bullshit, there is another NPC who you have to unlock the door first, but you don't even have to do that. You just talk to him and he disappears. What the fuck? The game makes no fucking sense. But Speaking of nonsensical yet again, we have the rats in this small area who serve to be the more annoying type of enemies we'll be dealing with a lot more later. And there's also going to be another big one, which you'll want to contend with, because he'll give you the blood bite ring, which will make your bleed bar much higher so you don't get insta-killed because of bullshit. But I lunged the firebomb. I think I ended up hitting the small ones. Yeah, and I also get the big one. And I also use the black one because it does more damage, but as with Bloodborne, you can only carry a certain amount of items at a time, which is whatever. I'll just save my tangents for a later date. But make sure you get that item, the blood bite ring, before moving on. Thankfully, a lot of the enemies that you do kill will give you the item right away, which is good, because there's a lot of annoying things in this game, but I suppose that's one of the few good things. But speaking of goodness, we're going to go back to not Firelink Shrine. And I'm sorry, I don't consider this place Firelink Shrine. It is just, as I posted, or as someone posted on the Discord, it's just a lame callback for the sake of being a lame callback and just being a homage and nothing more. There are so many fucking fan service bits in this game, it's not even funny. But make absolutely sure you talk to the Londor boy, because he will give you a gesture, and this can be easily missed. Ripley's, believe it or not. And I actually talked to him again later on. You will also want to give this dude Loretta's Bone, because he will, you can open his stuff later. You actually have to revisit Firelink twice, or do the good old-fashioned quit out, before he eventually calms his senses. The first time you come back, he will be in a state of grief, which will allow you to, in turn, steal the essence with the Dark Hand. Giving you the ability to learn his gesture, and then after you come back again, he'll be completely fine, and you can do business with him, which he actually does sell a lot of good items, so it's actually very much worth it to keep him around. Though there is a particular part of the game which can easily mess up his quest line, which we'll go over later. There's also another NPC which we'll be doing business with, but he can also be a very annoying person of interest. You can also buy some spells from the Londor boy, but thankfully you can technically buy these later. I'm going to buy the Soul Arrow for now, simply because it's the meta magic weapon in Dark Souls 1, since magic in Dark Souls 1 doesn't use any stamina, and it's probably why it was so easy. Thankfully in Dark Souls 2 this was fixed, and in Dark Souls 3 you have the blue bar, the focus points I think it's called, so I kind of prefer the focus point system better since it was in Demon Souls, and I really hated it in Dark Souls 1. You couldn't recover your spell usage in any way. Dark Souls 2 did fix this, but they made the items pretty rare and annoying to get, but it is what it is, as the ancient tech Mayans would say. Ancient Aztec, whatever the fuck. I forget the quote from the almighty underscore. Oh yeah, and almost forget, you gotta go talk to the Pyromancy dude if you want to get his Pyromancy Flame, and I think if you talk to him again, he gives you the welcome gesture, which is the similar gesture to the well, what is it one, a very infamous gesture from Dark Souls 1, and I'm kind of sad that they didn't bring that one back, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's just a callback for the sake of a callback, as I mentioned earlier. There's also a really funny video I saw in Dark Souls 3 of a dude who basically restored the giant dad, and even having the same gesture and the same weapons to boot. So I guess even all the blatant fan service, the modding scene could be very much be of interest. The only thing we need now is a total recreation of Dark Souls 1 and 2 within the Dark Souls 3 engine, and I think it'd be a lot better. But they have to fix the bullshit this game introduced first. But not going to really get into that ordeal. But make sure you level up properly. You got to be pumping that dex up so you can make this weapon into the ultimate god killer. Because they're not going to be only fighting nameless kings later on, but literally nameless gods. And if you know that reference without having to look it up, you are a cultured individual. Or a gentleman and a scholar, as they say. I don't know what the female equivalent of it is, so I'm just going to shut my yap and keep on yapping about something else, I guess. You might have noticed I actually ended up having less health, and that's because I actually died on the way to getting this door open. And that's because there is a hollow dude who wields one of the weapons you can only get from his particular drop loots. I forget the name of him right now, but you'll be seeing him in a second. This weapon is so inconsistent as to how to get in various games. In the first game, it was a drop or you could buy from a shop. Depending on what version of Dark Souls 2 you're playing, you either define as a drop or obtain it somewhere else. And in this game, they make it a very low drop rate for this enemy right here, who is basically a glass cannon. And it's even worse later on, because essentially fight the same version of the enemy, except they have that thing that blacksmith use, tempering the weapon, so it does even more stupid damage. But you do have to open this door if you want to get the shortcut. I still want to know why the hell that door is locked over there. And it's not even like you pulled the thing out or whatever, so I don't know. It's just really nonsense. But I guess it's not that far from the bonfire, so make sure you do that. But speaking of going places, we're going to be heading over to the Crystal Lizard, I believe. Again, because we didn't come here before. It has been a while since I actually recorded this, so I kind of forget at the moment, but I could go on a lot about the things of this game, to be honest, but I know that people defend it as the perfect game, and I know that some people consider this game really fucking boring, which I don't blame them, to be honest, because this game is really, really the Metroid fusion of the Dark Souls games, and I know it doesn't really make any sense, but when you look at it from a level design perspective, it just kind of does. But there's the Sharp Gem. That's what we need to create the ultimate weapon. But this game really is like Metroid Fusion in the sense that the game is a lot more linear, like with Dark Souls 2, but not as bad, I guess. At least in Dark Souls, you can kind of create your own adventure up until the end of the game. But in this one, it's a lot of the playthroughs are just kind of the same, because there's really no intricate level skips you can use. There's really not that many branching paths, and it's just kind of asinine. So now that I have recollected my thoughts on such things, I'm going to be going ahead and opening this door, which we needed the key for, which is from those pile of ashes we need. That is a Velka statue, I think her name is, the character who keeps getting referenced and never actually met in the games. This statue, thank God, it's not an NPC, it's not some stupid cat that has God mode on, or as a man of culture would call it, degree-lessness mode, unless you enter a very specific room in Phobos. Or Demos, whichever. I can't think of it right now. I'm too annoyed at this fucking game. You can essentially request absolution or essentially make yourself not be hollowed anymore, but that comes at a price and you don't want to mess that up. But basically, if you commit a sin, you can talk to the statue and, well, cleanse yourself of sin. Of course, the amount of souls you need to pay for it depends on your level, so if you haven't been leveling up, you can technically get away with that, but we are going to be going back to the statue at least twice, because we're going to be doing a little, you might want to cover your ears to this if you're a purist, game exploit to get best of both worlds. Now, speaking of online cheaters, there is a shield we're getting in a minute, and you don't ever want to pick this up if you plan on doing a level run. And that is because you will be getting a blessed red and white shield +1. There is absolutely no blessed red and white shield that is of normal stature. You just get a +1 version of a weapon that has no +0 for whatever reason. I really don't understand Hidetaka Miyazaki's design on this. It makes about as much sense as Hideo Kojima when he wrote Fortune in 2001. Okay. There are no fairy tales on magic, but literally the entire fucking Metal Gear Solid series is built on fucking supernatural bullshit. Okay. Look, I love Hideo Kojima, but even some things in those games just make no fucking sense. And even Metal Gear Solid 2 is already problematic with its story. It's not just because it's a strawman argument, so let's not even go there. But go ahead and talk to that girl. You do not want to commit to the dark side and give her the dark spells, because we're going to be using this man as our summon for various bosses. And he actually is quite a beast. Mainly because he's kind of like Paladin and Leroy from Dark Souls 1, except he kind of serves some importance to the story. But rescuing her will allow you to get one of the best miracles in the game, the Tears of Denial, which finally comes back after Dark Souls 2 while being balanced in that game, but horrendously unbalanced in this game. And I don't remember if it was any good in Demon Souls. It was called Second Chance, which is giving me Black Ops 1 PTSD, and not for the good reasons. But there's our Onion Man of the evening, but we're not going to be talking to him. Instead, we're going to be peeling another form of element, which is this enemy who I can't remember the name of, but he is all icy and shit, and he serves as our mini-boss. Actually, check if there's an item. I guess there isn't. There's some item around one of these areas, I think. If not, I must having a schizo moment. But whatever. This enemy is really annoying. He also does give you an Irithyll straight sword, which is good. I think that's the item right there. Yeah, you get 1 ember. You're probably gonna need it because this dude is annoying as fuck. He's really fast, annoying, and he's essentially a smaller version of Vort, except he uses a straight sword, which has ice properties, which is completely useless in PvE, by the way. It's essentially beginner shot to think you got a really cool weapon, but the fucking ice properties just barely does anything decent in PvE, honestly. It's a waste of a weapon and don't even bother upgrading it. So yeah, that's also another way to cheese the system if you don't want to deal with this bullshit. Unfortunately, you can't really bring the others they'll be fighting later on, but we'll get to those soon, don't worry. But once you take care of Iceman over there, which unfortunately we don't have the electric weapons to deal with him, you can open up this door and light the bonfire here. No, playa. There you go. Road of Sacrifices. We're not going to be going for this area yet because we still got a little bit more to do. But just for convenience sake, we're going to light that Boon Fieri, or Fuego, as some might call it, and continue on. Because we're going to be going to the Onion Man now. I probably should have rested at the bonfire, but whatever. This isn't Dark Souls 1, thankfully, so I didn't pay the piper, as they say. Now, there's going to be a little cheeky edit, because I actually had to cut, so you're going to probably be seeing the elevator come down at any point. There we go. I also ended up dying, by the way. And that is because you have to fight this giant lava monster dude, who will fuck your shit up if you're not careful. You also have to be very careful as to how you fight this dude, because you can actually have Onion Man help you, but if he dies, you're basically fucked. So you want to try to run in as quickly as you can and just deal as much damage as possible. And of course, as with the golden rule of having phantoms or even having allies in any game, you don't want to constantly rely on AI, but you also want to take turns aggroing the AI so that you both don't end up falling under the sun. And also in the hope that if you're the host and you die, well, then it's game over for everybody and you're just fucked. And you're also kind of an asshole if you rely on just the AI. Look, it's one thing if you summon or whatever, but if you can't even comprehend basic game design and not have an AI do everything for you, that's why people look down such things, but whatever. So yeah, I ended up biting the bullet against this fire demon, but thankfully this one isn't too bad, and plus you have the Onion Man to help you. I forget his name, nor do I care to remember the names, honestly, because these games have basically no fucking story, and I'm going to really get into that shit. I'm going to test out my magic, but unfortunately it does nothing, because I didn't pick the sorcery class, but that move right there is the one that really caused me to get killed. But as with the golden rule, like I mentioned earlier, have the fire demon be aggro to the fucking Onion Man, and then just hit him from behind. When he gets enraged, though, you'll want to be really careful because he'll essentially get more damage. I think I was going to do some move, but I don't know what it was. Also note that the Onion Man can heal, but like I said, you don't want to have him do all the work for you, as he is not a average phantom. And I almost died there again. Yeah, this was probably my most sloppiest run fighting that fucker. And he also gives you a fire gem, which is good for some weapons. It also makes quick work with specific enemies. We're not going to be really using it that much. But go ahead and talk to Onion Man. He'll give you 2 gestures. You'll want to make sure you get the sleep one because, well, you can miss it. And he also gives you a Siegbrow, which is strangely one of the very few items that also heals you besides the Estus Flask. And I guess someone at Dark Souls 2 B team must have really learned their lessons about the Life Gem fiasco, because the amount of other items besides Estus you can use is extremely rare, like legit. Divine Blessings you only get 1 use out of. The Siegbrow you can only carry a certain amount, and they're not even anything that you can farm or buy. Like, the other amount of healing items in this game are just, like, legitimately limited, and the only way to even get anything close to that shit is using any weapon that has the Blessed Infusion. And not only does it take care of skeletons in the catacombs, but it also very slowly but surely heals your health. So you want to have that sucker on if you're not going to be using anything else. But we're not going to be using this weapon for long, as we're going to be getting the best shield in the game if you're not going to be using it for blocking. Also, I forgot to mention this while I was ranting my ass off because tangents can cause forgetfulness, but make sure you grab that pale tongue because you're going to be needing that for later. And I also died to these, not the dogs, actually, surprisingly, no. I ended up dying to those fat women with the giant bleed sticks. I forget their name. They're not even that good a weapon. It's kind of a rare drop, surprisingly. At least I grabbed this super telegraphical, yeah. But going on about fat mamas and shit, I would not be surprised if these same degenerates who get off to polygonal feet got off to those fucking big mommy milkers, that is, the evangelists, I think they're called. Whatever. Just don't go to toe-to-toe with them. Their spiky chains really hurt, they can knock you back pretty far, and their grab attacks are, as with any Dark Souls enemy worth a goddamn, really fucking annoying and bullshit. But speaking of bullshit, make sure you grab these items, particularly Lucitil of Mira, or her brother's name, who else I forget. That annoying fucker with that very extremely obnoxious rare drop. And a drop that's not even guaranteed, mind you, but I'm not going to get into that. Items, and we're going to be getting the helmet in a minute, though it does mean you have to give up a vertebra shackle, since, well, those things are fucking rare as shit. But going back to my previous point, again, you want to make sure you got the pale tongue, because we're going to be needing at least one for another quest line that we're going to be doing later on. You have to get them through invasions or as a drop from the Dark Wraiths who do return this game, because why not? And that is, I believe, the earliest you can get them without having to constantly farm PvP, or invasions in general. Now, also speaking of angrily lettered wording, as I believe I am going back to one of the covenants, which we'll be explaining in a second, whose fucking idea was it to make it so that the only other covenant item you can farm through PvP is the fucking Warrior of Sunlight? So there is a covenant called the Mound Makers, which essentially allows you to invade as a mad spirit, and in turn allow you to use the Red Sign Soapstone, which we'll be getting later on, to essentially engage in a form of PvP. Now, considering all the other covenant items are annoying as piss to get, why is the Warrior of Sunlight the only covenant that you can obtain sunlight medals in PvP? Like, if you were to join the... shit. I can't think of the covenant name right now. It's in the special area that shall not be named. There are these... okay, fuck. I can't even think of it. But while I recollect my thoughts a second, make sure you don't aggro this dude or else you can't enter the back of his, and make sure you very carefully obtain the Flame Soul Plate Ring, which we're going to be using a little later, if I remember to. But while I'm trying to get this thing, very horrible, by the way, and it actually can fall off, by the way, so be careful. And just make sure you grab it before it falls into the abyss. But the Mountain Makers essentially allows you to invade other people, whatever. And if you use the Red Sign Soapstone, but you have the fucking Warrior of Sunlight badge equipped, you can essentially get sunlight medals through Red Sign Soapstones. Now, why the fuck can you get those items in the same way as the other covenants? It makes no fucking sense. It legit makes no fucking sense. Vertebra shackles and proof of a consort kept are some of the most rarest fucking covenant items in the game, and yet you can't obtain them unless you partake in their specific covenants and shit. If you use any other covenant or whatever, the only item you get is fucking Pale Tongues. It makes no fucking sense, and I hate this game for having even more annoying-ass covenant farming than in Dark Souls 2, and unironically enough, Dark Souls 1 is the only game in the series with the covenant farming being a lot more reasonable compared to the games that came out after it, dude. It annoys the fuck out of me. Like, seriously. It really annoys the piss out of me that in all of B-Team's wisdom of trying to make the game not like Dark Souls 2 again, because people sure fucking hate that game, they made some of the most obnoxious as fuck changes in this game, and I'll never forgive them for it. Seriously. There are so many things this game could have been to make it the ultimate Dark Souls experience, but they just got lazy, made throwbacks for the sake of callbacks, having covenant items being annoying as fuck to obtain, and no amount of mods or whatever, whether it be a Dynasty Warriors clone or a Pokemon clone or whatever the fuck, can change all that shit. This game is severely flawed, but at least it's short, quote-unquote, on repeat playthroughs, so there is some fun and passion in it, but that, of course, will be misdirected as me complaining about the game, even though I'm not really a fan of these games, but for the sake of tolerance, I can at least kind of find things to enjoy in them, but whatever. Holy shit, that was a big-ass fucking rant of mine, Jesus Christ. But anyway, I believe I'm just roaming around Firelink. I believe the only other thing left to do now, which I actually have to make another edit, is to go talk to the Leonhardt, which we'll be doing a little later. And of course, getting the... Getting the rat dude, I forget his name, Grey Rat, there we go. Sending off to Pillage, in which we'll be having him come back after the next boss fight, which is going to be the Curse Rod of Greatwood, which unfortunately won't be able to go on as much time as I'd like, considering that I am censoring because I care, but people mistake that as censoring, but we're not going to really get into that. But make sure you drop these items, the ones I'm dropping, the fire bombs for extra large shards, and a Titanite chunk, probably the earliest you can get one, I believe. And also, dropping the vertebra shackles, since I'm not going to need them in this character to get Lucatiel's mask. So now we have a somewhat appropriate armor set to run around with. That's another thing too. Armor sets in this game are completely fucking pointless. As long as you are under 70% equipment load, you can just kind of wear whatever the fuck you want. And I kind of don't understand that. Like, poise is practically non-existent. There's no reason to have anything above 70% because there's no mid-roll, which even the mid-roll in Dark Souls 1 was kind of okay. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was somewhat viable. Even the rolling in Dark Souls 2 is whatever, depending on how you look at things. But yeah, I forgot to have to reload the area in order to get the key, so I believe the cutoff is going to be in a second. I also have to go talk to the Grey Rat again. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm probably forgetting something. But yeah, I might as well continue my tangent, I guess. Shit, I forgot what I was going about. But yeah, there are a lot of things in this game that just annoy the fuck out of me. But there's also some things you can give credit for with this game too. Like, you can actually sell souls to the Shrine Maiden and it's the exact same value as if you use them, making the fat trimming all the more appreciated. There's a very blatant cut, by the way, because they're like, wait a minute, I'm probably forgetting something. It's like, oh yeah, I have to go talk to Leonhardt again to get the lift chamber key. And I also go talk to Grey Rat to send off the pillage, but we'll be worrying about him in the next installment. But yeah, this game does trim their fat in some ways, which is good, because there's a lot of things in Dark Souls 2 that were definitely kept in from Dark Souls 1. And I feel this game does a lot of good job of trimming the fat, but there's so many other things to introduce that just make no fucking sense. Like with the whole PvP Covenant farming I went on about and all that shit. The fact that you essentially have a home base of operations, except you can't bring it with you anywhere, yet people complain that you have to level up a Majula, which is exactly how leveling up worked at Demon Souls, by the way. It's just that people forget that because they never played Demon Souls, only saw one person play it, and it as if they fucking knew about the fucking thing, which is ridiculous, but whatever. But speaking of ridiculous, we're going to end the video by going back to High Wall of Lothric by WARPING, back to a previous area which we couldn't get to before, and it's kind of out of the way if you think about it, but thankfully it's not that far from WARPING to another area, which is, of course, this lift chamber door, which houses exactly one Dark Wraith. Now, you can use this area to practice against him, and I recommend that you do, because these enemies do not fuck around. There is a set that does appear before a boss fight, and they will absolutely wreck your shit. And they also wrecked mine, honestly. I also test out the Pyromancy here, but I'm not going to be really using too many of those. Although there is one that's really good, but you don't get it until way later in the game, which I believe is Support, which actually works a lot better than it does in Dark Souls 1, unironically enough. And it actually does work on a lot of enemies, and I really encourage people to give it a shot. It actually does change up the meta of the game a little bit. So, just keep in mind, though, that you do have to have stats now to use Pyromancies, which is kind of lame, but I guess it does balance it out compared to Dark Souls 2. Especially since in Dark Souls 2, you couldn't even start with Pyromancy, you had to actually find the fucking gloves, and even finding the set. But at least you got the other Pyromancy glove, which scales if you're hollowing, I guess. So I guess it kind of balances itself. But yeah, this particular Dick Wraith is, well, a dick, but you can shorten his E-penis by doing various backstabs. He also gives a good amount of souls, too. I think you can also get his armor set as well as a sword if you don't feel like tangling with the other ones that are much near a bonfire. But we're going to go ahead and use Homeward Bone one more time to go back to Firelink. Report, no pun intended, to Leon Hart for a job well done, and then we're pretty much done. So yeah, this video was quite long to be honest, but that's okay because despite not fighting any bosses, the exploration in Dark Souls is unironically one of the greater things about it. It's just a shame that there's so much bullshit in these games, but I guess that's why the Souls-like genre is so popular. But unfortunately, people only allow it to be nothing but bosses, which is kind of why something like Contra Shattered Soldier is, well, a failed lesson in that it wants to be so much of a boss rush game rather than the very thing that made Contra really fun. Running and gunning with a lot of focus on level design and, well, the various bosses that require you to hit everything and not die once lest you don't get the best ending. In which, even in those games, in that game in particular, you have to beat it no more than 4 times to unlock everything in the fucking theater mode as well as all the other shit that comes with it. But at least there's one thing the Contra Shattered Soldier is fair. And if all the bullshit of getting good can legit apply to Shattered Soldier, because 1 life and you don't get access to the final stage, I think. Now enjoy this last clip of me discarding F in chat. Thank you for watching and take care.